Welcome to Straight Talk with Tracey. Thanks for joining me. Today we're going to be talking to Randy Silverman, who is the co-founder and CEO of the Youth Mental Health Project. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you
Randy.
for having me, Tracey.
Lots to talk about. We've met before, so I know you have a really compelling story.
Oh, thank
So
you.
we're going to try and get it all in today. Why don't you start by telling us what is the Youth Mental Health Project?
Well, the Youth Mental Health Project is a nonprofit 501c3 organization that I co-founded with my dear friend, Wendy Ward, who is the executive director. And we created the Youth Mental Health Project to empower and educate and support families with regard to the mental health of our young people. And it's been a really exciting
Journey.
It's been a really exciting journey. Yes, yeah, it's been really exciting.
So this is an organization that is targeted towards parents that are dealing with their own children who are dealing with mental health issues. What's the range of mental health issues that
yes, it is about that. It's about more than that, though, we hope. What Wendy and I have discovered, and we both have had personal experience raising children with a variety of mental health concerns, what we discovered is that all children have mental health. Mm-hmm. And that mental health isn't just about a mental illness or a diagnosis of some kind, that it lies on a continuum, right, from healthy and well to ill. And so we believe that we need to educate society about the overall understanding of what youth mental health means, mm-hmm, not just problems or diagnoses, and not just about wellness, but about the entire thing. So what we recognized is that there is an epidemic in our country right now, that the rates of suicide are increasing dramatically. In fact, suicide is the second leading cause of death in ages 10 to 24 years old. Mm. There are approximately 18 million children in our country who struggle with a diagnosable mental health condition. Mm. So we know that with any other kind of medical condition, right, early intervention can make all the difference. Right. And yet we don't talk about our children. We talk about young adults sometimes, and college-age kids, and sometimes teenagers dealing with depression and anxiety, but we're not talking about our children.
When you say we, you mean we as a society. Right.
As a society.
Right.
And half of all lifetime cases of mental health diagnoses emerge before the age of 14 years old. Right. If we wait until a child goes into adolescence and teenage years and high school and college, we're waiting too long. Mm-hmm. So how do we change the conversation, and instead of always being in crisis mode dealing with mental illness, let's teach parents and communities and families and organizations, the world really, that we need to start thinking about children's mental health from the moment they're born, mm-hmm, just like we think about their physical health, right, just like we learn about what food is appropriate to feed our babies. We need to learn more about how to nurture and care for their mental health, right, and how to recognize and treat when there's something that might be feeling not right. Just as though we know a fever in a child is an indication that there's something going on with their physical health. Right. We need to learn more about how do we recognize signs of concern with their mental health. But we can't do that if we don't look at it as an overall picture of health. Right.
So your mission is to educate and provide resources. Mm-hmm. How do people access that information from you?
Well, our website is one place, and you can Google the Youth Mental Health Project, or they can look us up at ymhproject.org. And on our website, we have quite a bit of educational materials and resources. what we're trying to focus on, and we do several things. Our mission is to educate and empower and support families, parents, and communities. And so there are several things that we do. We go into communities and we have workshops that we can give to communities for schools, parents, other nonprofit organizations. I did write and produce a feature film called No Letting Go.
Right.
And that has won a lot of film festival awards. And that film is being used in communities to have community conversations. And so we have programs around the film. And we speak at conferences and do a lot of training for, again, both teachers and even mental health professionals who want to understand more about the family perspective.
Right.
So that's one thing we do. We also have developed educational materials, and I see you're holding some of them
I do.
right there in our hands. So we've developed a booklet on understanding and supporting youth mental health, which it sort of will give a little bit of examples of the appropriate ages and stages of development of what is normal, or I hate to use the word normal, but what we see as typical behavior versus behavior that might be signs of concern.
Right.
We also just finished a fantastic 32-page booklet that we wrote in conjunction with Child Guidance Center, Fairfield County, and that's understanding youth mental health, all the questions that parents frequently ask, but maybe are afraid to ask. And that's really great. And by the way, this booklet on understanding youth mental health, we created in conjunction with Silver Hill Hospital and the experts there. We could not have done that without them. So they were really our first partners in creating simple, easy to understand educational materials that normalize the conversation.
Right.
And they've been really, really great partners of ours. So we've been thrilled about our partnership there.
Great. Yeah, so you mentioned milestones. So when parents bring their kids into the pediatrician, they chart their height and weight on those charts, and parents get so excited, oh, we're in the 75th percentile, right? So we in psychology and psychiatry, in mental health, we have the same normative or typical trajectory. And it's not spoken about, but there are milestones that parents can look for to say, yeah, we're kind of hitting those milestones and moving along that psychological or social emotional developmental trajectory, right? So getting that information to parents is really super important. Why do you think, what are the hurdles to parents talking about mental health issues?
Well, I think the barriers are culturally ingrained and very, very deep. It's some people use the word stigma. I don't think stigma really adequately describes what's happening. I think there is a lot of shame and blame and misunderstanding, and all of that feeds into a cycle of silence. Nobody wants to admit that their child might have an emotional or mental or behavioral health problem. And that's because as a society, we look at children's behaviors in direct proportion to parenting.
Right.
And so we just...
what we call a narcissistic investment.
We do. Right? We just say, well, if your child isn't behaving, it must be...
bad parenting.
Bad parenting.
Right.
Or it must be something bad happened to that child. Or the parents let something bad happen to that child. And so parents feel that blame just intuitively, because that's how we all are out in society. I always joke around about even now, and I know not to do this, but I could go into a grocery store and you see a kid freaking out because he's not getting the lollipop he wants. And we just instinctively turn to check out that mom. What is that mom doing?
Right.
And no matter what she does, we have a judgment about her. Either she spoils him by giving him the lollipop, and I would never do that, or she ignores him, and then we think, oh, why doesn't she just give him? Mothers can't win. And that's true for dads too, but I do think that mothers bear the brunt of the blame, so to speak. So I think our society is so caught up in that cycle, it's very hard to move past that. It's hard to break those barriers and let people know that, you know what, 1 in 5 children in our country struggle with a diagnosable mental health condition. And it's okay that we talk about it. And we have to start talking about it just like we talk about a broken arm or allergies or asthma. And unfortunately, it just hasn't hit playground conversation yet.
Right.
But that's our ultimate goal,
Great.
is to make this something we can all comfortably talk about. And so you were talking about the milestones that in the world of psychology, those of you who are trained in the field understand. Parents don't get that training.
Right.
And it's not available in the world.
That's right.
There's no growth chart in the pediatrician's office about mental health.
That's right.
And we're hoping to change that.
That's great.
Yeah.
So I'd like to touch on, when we come back, we're going to take a quick break, but I'd like to touch on some of those in the different developmental stages, some of the things to look for in kids and how to start that conversation
Great idea.
in homes.
Okay.
Okay, we'll be right back.
Great.
For 1 in 4 Americans, mental illness hits close to home. And since 1931, Silver Hill Hospital has also been close to home. For individuals and families facing the challenges of mental illness, Silver Hill offers a highly trained, compassionate staff that provides state-of-the-art care in a beautiful and private setting. If mental health issues hit close to home, remember, there's a world-class psychiatric hospital right in the neighborhood.
Welcome back. I am joined today by Randy Silverman, who is the co-founder and CEO of the Youth Mental Health Project. Again, thanks for being with me today.
Thank you for having me.
This is such a worthy topic, and I know anyone who's watching is going to be really thankful to get this information.
I hope so.
And to hear about your project.
And thank you for bringing us in to talk about it. It is such a vital conversation that we need to have in all communities.
That's right.
And it's difficult. It's
Yes.
a difficult conversation for most people. It's not difficult for me.
Or me,
you.
right,
So-
right.
So we can just be that outlet
That's
for
right.
other people.
That's right.
And what they want to talk about.
That's
that they're
right.
not talking about.
How
But
to
we're
do
gonna
it.
Get them. This is how you talk about it.
That's right.
Exactly.
So you mentioned, we talked in the first segment about milestones, right? So what are some of the things that parents can look for that might be signs of concern?
Well, let me back up by saying that I'm not the clinician, okay? I am a parent,
Right.
and I just want to give you a little bit about my background. My son, my middle son, I have 3 children, when he was very young, started exhibiting signs of very intense anxiety. But I didn't know children could struggle with mental health. So to me, he was just difficult. And to the rest of the world, I was just a bad mother. And unfortunately, this, as I spoke before earlier in the segment, this cycle of blame and shame and misunderstanding and silence sort of really, not sort of, it definitely impacted our ability to find help.
Right.
Because if you don't know that a problem can exist, how do you get help for it?
Right.
Getting back to how do you know
Right.
if a behavior or a thought or a feeling of a child is a sign of something,
Right.
or it's just that you have, oh, he's just a boy, or oh, she's just a moody girl,
Right.
or all of the other things we excuse our
Right.
children's behaviors on. So what I have learned through my time, really, my efforts began in trying to speak out and speak to the fact that 1 in 5 children in our country struggle with a diagnosable mental health condition. And that led me to understand that it's not difficult to learn about this stuff.
Right.
It's just, you can't, it's complicated and overwhelming because of the silence around it. So as a parent, what I know now, what I wish I had known earlier, is less about what are individual signs, because as a clinician, I'm sure you know, there are thousands of different signs.
You're right.
And each child is unique, and each stage and age of development is unique. And I think our booklet that we wrote with Silver Hill Hospital helps to kind of show a little bit of the basics of at what age and stage are certain things appropriate and not appropriate, and there's a great list of behaviors or symptoms, if you will.
Right.
But what I say to parents because I get this question all the time, how do you know?
What do I look for?
What do I look for?
Right.
I said, what you need to look for is how is your child functioning? Mm-hmm. So there are 3 major spheres of life for all of us. For children, it's home life, school life, and then social, extracurricular activities, friendships, that type of thing. And if your child is not able to properly function in any one of those spheres of life, then that's something to be concerned about. And so what do I mean by functioning?
Right.
I'm sure you're going to ask me. Go ahead, you ask. Sorry. I'm asking my own questions now.
I'm just going to leave and you can...
No, I'm just the interviewer. I forgot. This is a conversation.
Right. So school, social, and home, right? So what does that mean, not functioning?
Well, so for instance, in my son's case, he was fine when he was at school, but at home, he was very explosive and erratic.
Right.
And sometimes just really difficult to manage.
Right. And that's not atypical because kids who are anxious or depressed will often hold it together at great expense to their...
That's exactly right.
...to their energy level. And then when they get home, they just erupt.
Fall apart.
They fall apart.
So
right.
what I was getting from the school in those early years was, well, it's a home problem.
Right.
You know,
or
take
he's
a
great in
parenting
school.
class.
Yeah.
Or I had one, literally the first grade psychologist said to me, your son is fine, but mom has some problems that need to get help for. You know,
there's that shaming.
And again, the shaming and
the blaming.
And the blaming, and self-blame.
Right.
I didn't know, so she must be right. And my husband thought, well, I needed to be tougher on him, and I was babying him. Well, my other 2 children didn't behave that way, and I treated them the same way, so it didn't make sense.
Right.
Ultimately, though, my son became so anxious and depressed that he could barely go to school.
Right, so it started to creep into the other domains.
Now, right, in terms of when he got there, he was okay, although he spent a lot of time in the nurse's office with headaches and stomach aches. But getting him there became impossible.
Right.
So then it was seeping into a second sphere of life, which was, again, the teacher said, well, he's fine when he's here. I said, well, that's great, but if he can't get there, what good is it?
Right.
He can't get there. And he was 9 when he started what we now know as school refusal. Just, you know, every day being a negotiation of how was I going to get him to school.
Right.
So those are examples of really not functioning well, both in terms of a school life,
right?
Because if you can't get there,
right.
you're certainly not functioning, and in how he functioned at home, and eventually he couldn't tolerate play dates and
right.
lost friends and quit all his activities. So those are maybe extreme examples, but when you're in general, as a parent you're questioning that something's happening with your child that's interfering
right.
in and impacting in a negative way. That's what I mean by functioning. It's interfering and impacting in a negative way, one of those spheres of life. Then it's time to take a look at what's going on emotionally or in terms of that child's mental health.
Right. As you began to navigate the mental health system, which can be a labyrinth for people, particularly for child and adolescent psychiatry, psychology, mental health, there are not a lot of practitioners that are qualified to treat child and adolescent mental health issues. So finding a good clinician is a big part of the problem. So how do you advise parents to begin to navigate the system?
I wish I had a magic answer for that one. I mean, I wish I could just change the system. We all do. Those of us who are in this world really know how difficult this is. And in fact, there's a line in the movie where the mother in the movie, No Letting Go, that I wrote, says there are more taxidermists in this country than there are child psychiatrists. And that's an actual true statistic. I mean, that's just, can you imagine if we didn't have enough pediatricians?
Right.
We would never stand for that.
Right.
But it is a sad fact of life.
Right.
And so And mental health is complicated. So especially with children, because they're growing and changing and developing. So that's another thing. And some clinicians are really well versed in some areas and not as well versed in other areas.
Right.
So a clinician who really focuses on ADHD, for instance, maybe won't necessarily understand the proper treatment for a child who has bipolar disorder.
Right.
So it's very complicated. I'm not really giving you a good answer, except that what I tell parents is trust your gut. I didn't listen to my gut because I figured, oh, that doctor knows, or that doctor must know. And I spent a lot of time with doctors who weren't helpful, and then I had to teach myself in order to learn really the questions to ask, to find the appropriate help. And I didn't trust in my own gut. And so I say, listen, if you feel something's not right, you go search for clinicians and don't be afraid to ask questions. And you'll know when you found the right one. In terms of finding them, I mean, we're lucky here in Connecticut and in New York. Silver Hill Hospital is an amazing place for resources and information. Unfortunately, they don't do a lot of work with young children, but you have child guidance of Fairfield County. And I always say, look up your local mental health organizations, even your county Department of Mental Health. There are resources out there.
Yes.
They're just not on a silver platter.
Right.
As a parent, you have to be empowered and proactive when it comes to mental health because the information is still so tightly held and it's just not out in the public. That's why we're trying to empower parents. To feel empowered, it's okay to
ask the questions.
It's okay to do the research. It's okay to talk to other parents. And frankly, we find the best resources come from other parents.
Yes.
Which is why we're starting a parent support network.
That's wonderful.
We're piloting this fall.
Great.
In several locations. And our hope is to bring it national. And because parents really know how to help each other.
That's right.
I've been down the road, so I can tell you, I live in Westchester County, I can tell you the resources in Westchester County because we've developed networks in Westchester County with all the parents. So if we could have parent support networks in all communities where parents like me who have been through the system and struggled or can help those who are at the beginning to save them some of the pain and difficulty because we can get them to early intervention.
Right.
Wonderful. That's really the hope.
Wonderful. So I want to, again, tell people where they can access this information, this amazing, wonderful, vital information that you have put together so beautifully.
Thank you.
What are your websites?
So we are the Youth Mental Health Project. Just say that loud and clear. Youth Mental Health Project. And our website is ymhproject.org.
Great.
You can Google me, Randy Silverman, or my film No Letting Go, and that'll get you to us as well.
Great.
So,
and we will have all of these resources and more on the website.
Thank you.
At the end. But thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thank you for having me and for engaging in this really important and vital conversation. We really need to empower our communities and our families and make talking about children's mental health not so scary. It doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be. So thank you very much.
Well said.
Thanks.
Take care, and we'll be back next month. Thank you for joining us here today at Straight Talk with Tracey.